Haroshim come from. Sometimes you know.
Well, yes, correctly means just on the tip of your fingers, but I can't actually define it. When a person loses the function of his hand, this got your meaning. That's because there was shikha. There's kochach Yerushalayim. Your mind has ceased to function, as we mentioned. Therefore, the right hand also ceases to function. This got your meaning. That's a mensch. Your das and your hand. Speak, of course, about God's meaning. The meaning, the power of deeds, doing it. Man is composed of two consciousnesses. And doing it. And it's lost. Tidbak l'shayni l'chiti. Lo yaskerechi. Let my tongue,
My palate. If your tongue cleaves to your palate, you can't speak. Try speaking when your tongue is glued to your palate. But your tongue is there. Arm refer tongue. You just have to remove the adhesive, the glue. You can speak. You could bring it back. But that's Himlayas Karechi. If Yerushalayim is something which is back there someplace, it's past the back burner in your mind. It's there, but it's not there. But then he goes on to say, David HaMelech,
of course, he's speaking about himself. Speaking about every need. The shir of life. The minimum shir. What's clear? What's the minimum shir? The minimum shir is that the scheme of Yerushalayim
it occurs to me that with this in mind, we can understand a minhag of Klal Yisrael. I say Klal Yisrael because I think it's across the board by all members of Klal Yisrael. By a chasana, Baruch Ata Hashem, Sameach Chasanim Akalo, and we break a kos. What we call Zeichel L'Churban. Al Es Yerushalayim Al Rosh Simchasi. And at that point, punkt, we break a kos. We're not going around the whole day and breaking kosses, Zeichel L'Churban. Though it should always be in the palm of my hand. Why by the simcha of a chasen kala? And the purpose is to bring tsar to the person. The tsar of the churban. Is this the time to bring in some tsar in the festivities? And here what might be what the answer is. May be familiar with the Gemara, Tainis, Daf Lamed. Kol hamis'abel al Yerushalayim, zoiche v'roya b'simchasa. A person grieves over the churban, he will merit the roya b'simchasa. Now there's a difficulty over here. What is really the chiddush of this memory of Chazal? This is even more than the general hanhaga of Mida Keneged Mida. Stands to reason. If a person grieves over Yerushalayim, when there will be the simcha of Yerushalayim, B'shuvi l'Yerushalayim, stands to reason. Who then should have the simcha of Shivas Tzion? Someone who didn't grieve over the laws? And moreover, the Gemara brings a pasuk for this. It's a pasuk. If the Gemara brings a pasuk, it means I need a pasuk. I wouldn't have known it otherwise. Sisu ito mosos, kol hamis ablim oleho. Sisu ito mosos, zoiche v'roya b'simchos. I need a pasuk for this. So I'm going to say over now something from an Adam Gadol Ma'od, but I'm not sure who said it. But the Hakol Moedim, and he asked the question, he made the point. It says, Zoiche v'roya b'simchasa. Should have said, Yizke v'yira b'simchasa. Now he's being misabel on Yerushalayim. And you tell me if he's misabel on Yerushalayim, he will be Zoiche. So say it the right way. Say, Yizke v'yira lashon osid. Zoiche v'roya. Now, he's crying bitter tears. What does he see now? He sees what Yirmiyah saw when he got up the next morning. First word of the kidneys, Shavas. Everything has come to a stop. A wasteland. Literally, and more so figuratively. Zogt jene Yid, no. He's Zoiche v'roya b'simchosa now. Toich di avelis. He sees the Simcha of Yerushalayim. Now, let me explain this. I'll explain it best if I bring you a Gemara. In Doniel Kapitel Yud, it says that Doniel saw a vision, a chizoyon, and together with him were three other Yidden, Chagai Schaya Malachi, and they didn't see it, the Gemara says, according to Gemara, Tav Gimel Amid Aleph, Megillah. They didn't see what he saw. Nonetheless, the pasuk goes on to say, Charad gedoyla nafla aleihem. A trembling fell upon them. On Chagai Schaya Malachi. Vayivrachu behechove. They ran away to hide. They were so distraught that they ran to hide. Of course, had they not been so distraught, they would have realized that there's no place where you can hide. So, a chizoyon which Daniel saw, this was in the time of Malchus Porras, which was relatively mild. I'm underscoring the word relatively, which followed years later. This nevuah was about the difficult times ahead They're under the heel of Malchus Yavin. Daniel saw it. But they didn't see it. Either they saw it or they didn't see it. If they saw it, they would have fallen to the ground just like Daniel did and said, we can't go further. We're just totally distraught. Daniel had to be coaxed into listening weiter. This is all from Tanakh. But if they didn't see it, so why are they running away? And for the Gemara. Afagav de'inhu loy chozu, mazlaihu chozu. They didn't see it. But what the Gemara calls their mazel did see it. This is most interesting. We're not talking here about the meanderings of a person's imagination. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu plants in the person's nefesh a reality, which, to use the Gemara's terminology, he doesn't see it, but his mazel sees it. Enough so that he ran away. When you're misabel on Yerushalayim, you see, at that time, the Shiva Sion, the binyan Yerushalayim, and if there's somebody here, somebody elsewhere, somebody in our dor, in our generation, whose avelis on Yerushalayim would warrant the zoiche v'roya b'simchasa, on the other hand, together with me. It's a difference from Tog Tzanacht. Zoiche v'roya b'simchasa. Not just zoiche v'sameach. He's happy. He'll see the entire Klal Yisrael he would literally leap into the air. At this captivating, enthralling experience. We will leap into the air when it happens. But the misabel Yerushalayim, kiduboy, everything else. Kol ha-misabel Yerushalayim. There's not what to be misabel on the rest of Eretz Yisrael. Elamai, yeah, but it was also in Eretz Yisrael. So the key to this is the Tosfos. In Zvachim d'Samarc'h Amud Beis. It's a long Tosfos, but it's worth it to look up the Tosfos and to see what Tosfos says. And I'll tell you what Tosfos says. Tosfos says, Kedushas Eretz Yisrael was not bottled by the Churban. Tosfos is going to Shita Eretz Yisrael today had the same Kedusha that it had before the Churban. Makrivin. Shalayim. Or the Meichatsitzis. If you be Dirish, like David HaMelech says in Tillim, many sleepless nights. While I was studying, where will the Beis HaMikdash be? Like the Gemara spells it out in more detail. And that's what it says in Malachim. It says in Malachim, it's Malachim Aleph, Kapitel Ches. David HaMelech says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, please help me build the Beis HaMikdash. We know where it is. We have located it. Let me build the Beis HaMikdash. And David says, sorry, that's for your son, Shalom HaMelech. But, Hetivoisa, ki hoyem levavcha. It's good, meritorious, that you wanted to build a Beis HaMikdash. He's giving a compliment to David HaMelech. He's slapping him on the back. No, that's what brings about the Beis HaMikdash. Hetivoisa ki hoyem levavcha. That's the appeal to Yeshua. In this case, the appeal for the Beis HaMikdash. We'll bring it. Klal Yisrael never asked, please give us tefillin. And even if they did, it doesn't matter. That's not what brings about the mitzvah of tefillin. And the same for the Bayis Shlishi. That's our tzipiyah. You and me. And all the rest of us out there. Our tzipiyah. Our mitzapim liyeshua. Shmon Esrei. We'll bring the Beis HaMikdash. Kadosh Baruch Hu says, I go where I'm wanted. Really, really wanted. And finally, I know I'm a few minutes past, I'll be makatzer, but I do want to mention another nekuda, which many of us know about the churban of the Bayis Sheni. Was because of Sinas Chinam. And we're trying in these days to better ourselves in the midst of Ahavas Reim, the opposite of Sinas Chinam, Ahavas Reim. And I want to add another nekuda here. Rabbi Yisrael Salanta Paskins. First I'll tell you the nekuda, then I'll give you two examples. One from Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, one from the Chofetz Chaim. Sometimes a person wants to do a mitzvah, very eager to do a mitzvah, but he doesn't take into cheshbon will cause somebody else distress. It will cause him tsar. That's also included in the Ahavas Reim. Don't do a mitzvah at somebody else's expense of distress, hurt, possible effect it might have on somebody else, a negative effect. And here's an example from our Yisrael. Reuven spoke Lashon Hara on Shimon. Did an Avera. Shimon doesn't know about it. Reuven decides at some point, maybe it's 3 weeks, maybe it's whatever it is, maybe it's Chodesh Elul, whatever. I'm doing tshuva. I'm really doing tshuva. I won't speak Lashon Hara anymore. And I need a kapara. So I'll go, but I won't get a kapara unless the Shimon is moichel me. So I'll go to Shimon, I'll ask him, please be moichel me. Shulchan Aruch says, al yehei achzor. Shimon is not supposed to be cruel. Shimon is supposed to be moichel. Yes, very good. But did you give thought to the fact that if you're telling him that you spoke Lashon Hara on him, he will have tzar from that? Like this, he doesn't know that you spoke Lashon Hara on him. What he doesn't know won't hurt him. We're talking about a case where it really won't hurt him. Now that I know that somebody spoke Lashon Hara on me, and I even know who it was, that's a tzar. So you want to get Olam Haba at the expense of my Olam Hazeh. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. The way it works is, in order for you to get Olam Haba, you have to be mevater on your Olam Hazeh. That's how you get Olam Haba. But by not doing whatever you want in this world. You don't get Olam Haba by being mevater on somebody else's Olam Hazeh. I mean, Shimon won't go to the top of the roof and throw himself down. He'll survive. But it's Abyss Levine Goylam Hazeh now. Tzar. Yoivan Alav Deiraisa. Loisain Luishas Amisa. And the Chofetz Chaim, you may know this story, you may not. There was one lulav in Esrog town. They didn't have the Abba Minim. There's just one. So of course they gave it to All right, so that the bracha you can make, you could pass it around, everybody will make a bracha. Fine. But what about the nanuim by halal? Of course, everybody says, Moron, the Chofetz Chaim, should get the lulav and esrog. So the Chofetz Chaim said, I'm sorry. I'm not taking it. Why aren't you taking it? Nobody's, if you put it down, nobody's going to take it. Yeah, I know. And I also know that everybody really wants that I should have it. But I'm also choshesh, being the wise man that he was in the ways of the world, of the person. There will be some people that will feel bad because I have it and he doesn't have it. Of course, Chofetz Chaim should have it. Yeah, but meanwhile, he has it and I don't. Es tut mir weh. He'll never admit to it. But he'd rather that nobody have it. He feels bad he doesn't have it. But okay, even the Chofetz Chaim doesn't have it. That's an example also of doing a mitzvah and not thinking. I mean, he did think. Not thinking about the other person. How will this affect the other person? What impact will this have on the other person? That Zahirus is also included. The Ahavis Reim of this Tkufa and the year round. And I close with a bracha. From the davening, a bakosha from the davening. Yerushalayim Rachmim Toshuv V'sishkain b'toichel kasher dibarto Yerushalayim Ilcha B'rachmim Toshuv. Return to Yerushalayim with your mercy. V'tishkain b'toichel kasher dibarto. Well, what's this kasher dibarto? What does that mean? And what does that got to do with v'tishkain b'toicha? What is v'tishkain b'toicha? What is this tishkain? We said it already. Sh'laim milcha b'rachmim toshuv. So the explanation is that the word tishkain means la'olam. We find in Tanakh the word tishkain. Kapitel Kuf Yud Beis. I'm sorry, Kapitel Yud Beis. I'm not sure now if it's Kuf Yud Beis or Yud Beis, but it's one of those two. Pasuk says, the last word in the Pasuk. B'nei avodecha yishkoinu. B'nei avodecha yishkoinu. The sons of the tzaddikim, yishkoinu. V'zaram lefanecha yikoin. It says yishkoinu. What does it mean? B'nei avodecha yishkoinu. Where? When? So the Malbim Taichitz yishkoinu means forever. Yerushalayim Ilcha B'rachmim Toshuv just says come back, but that doesn't mean that it's forever. Abishai came back already to Yerushalayim, and then the Shekhinah left. But what we're asking for is that this is for the Bia Shlishis. This is for B'nei Avadecha Yishkoinu. This should be La'olam. And it should be quickly. The Mehera. Please. Bring the Beis HaMikdash for us, for all of Klal Yisrael. And our tefillah should be in his kabbalah.
Bishos. Rabbi Say, please come up front. We have a lot of seats in the front row. Please come up front. Bishos, Rabbonim, Chashuvim, Chol HaKol HaKodesh Hazeh. The story is told of a couple who had not yet been blessed with children. After many years, after many tefillas, and after so many tears, finally the Ikeres Habayis was expecting. And when she was in labor, it soon became evident to the doctor that there were severe complications. Her life was in danger, and there would be no way that she would survive the childbirth. Realizing the gravity of the situation, this woman gathered together her family members, her husband, her friends, to make one final dying request. Should my child survive, let him know what I sacrificed for his existence. Let him know that I gave up everything for him. And on my yahrzeit, he should remember me and appreciate the fact that I made the ultimate sacrifice for his very existence. And with those words on her lips, she fell unconscious. And a few moments later, as her neshama left this world, a healthy baby boy was brought into this world. One could not imagine a more bittersweet moment. The anguish of a young mother snatched from this world before she would get the chance to lay her eyes on her only child. Had given up. His picture with the end of the Shloshim, and each and every year, his birthday was the day of his mother's yahrzeit. And all of the family members and friends anticipated the day when this child would be old enough to say Kaddish for the mother that gave everything for her. After all, he was constantly reminded about his mother's Mesiras Nefesh for his very existence, the ultimate, literal Mesiras Nefesh. And finally, that day came. The day they were looking forward to. The day he would say that Kaddish, which would surely be chilling, emotion-packed, one that would stir the entire shul. But to their utter dismay, the child got up there and he mumbled through the Kaddish. He sped through it, devoid of any emotion, any feeling. He couldn't even shed a tear. Sensing his father's disappointment, the boy turned to his father and he explained, "Yes, I know in my mind. But I just can't feel it in my heart. You see, I never knew her. I never felt her warmth. I never experienced her caring and concern. It's so difficult for my emotions to align with my thoughts. The child is Klal Yisrael. The mother is the Beis Hamikdash. The Beis Hamikdash is referred to as a Mishkan. Chazal tell us it's Miloshin Mashkin, that's given to guarantee a chayv. So there are averis, but no currency could pay it up, except by giving their very lives, Rahman al-Islam. The Beis Hamikdash took the fall for us. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Shafach HaMosoi Aleitzim V'Avonim in our stead. The Beis Hamikdash paid the ultimate sacrifice for us. And the yahrzeit of the Beis Hamikdash, that's the day of our salvation. And to a degree, it's the day of our birthday. On the day of the Beis Hamikdash's yahrzeit, we should be standing here saying, but instead, most of us just speed through the kinnis, just as the young boy mumbled through the Kaddish, without any emotion, without any feeling. Because we too, just as that young boy, we never knew our mother, we never knew the Beis Hamikdash, we never experienced its Kedusha. That's why we have such a hard time connecting our emotions to all of the information that Chazal have taught us. When the second Beis Hamikdash was built, the Gemara says that the Na'orim, the younger generation, although they too were well aware of all of the second bias's shortcomings, they were elated with joy. A mere 70 years had passed since the Churban Bayis Rishon, and already the younger generation that had not personally witnessed the first Beis Hamikdash, already they couldn't feel the pain of all of the lost treasures and nisim of the first Bayis. Alachas kama v'kama in our generation. It's been 1,948. And Yevamis tells us that the Churban over the Beis Hamikdash is called an Avelis Yeshana. It's an old Avelis. And for this reason, there are differences in the Hilchas Avelis of Tisha B'Av as compared to the Hilchas Avelis that pertain to the mourning of the loss of a relative. The Erev Tisha B'Av Hayu Mevi'en Loi Pas Chareva B'Melach. They would bring him a little piece of dry bread with salt. V'hoya Yoshev bein Tanor L'Kirayim, lying in front of his eyes. The Tur is not a Musar Sefer. It wasn't just written for Grace Abali Madrega. The Tur is halacha psuka for every Yid. The Tur is telling us that the Avelis for the Beis Hamikdash on Tisha B'Av is here and now. Here. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Aleph writes, Roi l'chol yirei shamayim liyos meitzer v'doyig al churban Beis Hamikdash. Every day of the year, a yirei shamayim should worry and stress over the churban Beis Hamikdash. Not just role. Adkerei Churban Beis Hamikdash. He reminded the Yid about the Churban. Reb Yid, there was a Beis Hamikdash and it burned down. Oru ad hayisoid. The Yid was visibly moved. And he let out a krecht. But then he regained his composure. And he began his brisk pace once again, and once again the guy found himself lagging behind. Frustrated, the guy called out to the Yid, "Reb Yid, I thought you taught me a lesson. You told me a yisoid. Anocha shoiveres chatzi gufay." Anguish and pain breaks the guf. It has a physical effect on one's guf. Why didn't the remembrance of the Churban Beis Hamikdash break you? Why didn't it slow you down? And the Yid answered with a mashal. He said, if a mother, like Aleinu, she loses a child, pain is unimaginable. If she loses a second child, here Churban is here and now. It's a meisai mutal lefanov. But that which the Gemara calls it an avelis yeshana, it's not because we're mourning over something that happened in ancient times. It's because it's so current. It's so repetitive that we've already become numb. We don't feel it anymore. A meisai mutal lefanov, but at the same time an avelis yeshana. But what does this all mean? What's current about the Churban Beis Hamikdash? True, the Beis Hamikdash could have been built in our times. Had we rectified our actions? True, we have failed time and time again. And there is much to lament and mourn about ourselves, about our own shortcomings. But what about the Churban itself is so current that it's referred to as a meisai mutal lefanov? Often talk about the concept of tipiyah liyeshua. It's the first question that a person will be asked. One of the first questions a person will be asked. The Chafetz Chaim would give a mashal. How a person should anticipate to look forward to the Geula Hasidah. If a person would le'aleinu have a chayla mesukin in his home, a relative whose body was raging with disease, and there was no doctor immediately available to treat this chayla. The family sends a telegram to the neighboring town to summon their doctor to come treat the chayla. The clock is ticking. Hour. His condition is deteriorating. The family is sitting around the bed. It comes, or so it seems. They hear a faint noise outside, and one of the family members jolts towards the door to open it up. But alas, it's just the wind blowing. And one waiting. Another noise. Bona fide knock. Comes towards the door, and he opens up the door. Says the Chafetz Chaim, this is the same desperation waiting for the doctor. Decide to the train station. The doctor shows up. the chayla. That family, he sees the lights from a distance, baby after baby, time after time. Herein lies the explanation, the answer to the paradox. The Avelis of the Churban is here and now. It's a Meisai Mutal Lefanov. But that which the Gemara calls it an Avelis Yeshana, it's not because we're mourning over something that happened in ancient times. It's because it's so current. It's so repetitive that we've already become numb. We don't feel it anymore. A Meisai Mutal Lefanov, but at the same time an Avelis Yeshana. But what does this all mean? What's current about the Churban Beis HaMikdash? True, the Beis HaMikdash could have been built in our times. Had we rectified our actions? True, we have failed time and time again. And there is much to lament and mourn about ourselves, about our own shortcomings. But what about the Churban itself is so current that it's referred to as a Meisai Mutal Lefanov? The Chafetz Chaim would often talk about the concept of Tzipiyah Yeshua. It's the first question that a person will be asked, one of the first questions a person will be asked, Yeshua. The Chafetz Chaim would give a mashal, how a person should anticipate to look forward to the Geula Hasidah. If a person would le'aleinu have a chayla mesukin in his home, a relative whose body was raging with disease, and there was no doctor immediately available to treat this chayla. The family sends a telegram to the neighboring town to summon their doctor to come treat the chayla. The clock is ticking. And with every passing hour, his condition is deteriorating. The family is sitting around the bed, all eyes and ears fixated at the door, waiting for the knock of the doctor. And finally, it comes, or so it seems. They hear a faint noise outside, and one of the family members jolts towards the door to open it up. But alas, it's not a knock at all. It's just the wind blowing. And once again, the family members assume their positions around the bed, waiting for that knock of the doctor. And then they hear another noise. This time they're certain it's a bona fide knock. And again, one of the family members jumps towards the door with a look of desperation in his eyes. And he opens up the door to reveal none other than the mailman coming to deliver a package. And this scene repeats itself over and over again. Says the Chafetz Chaim, this is how a Yid has to be mitzapeh Yeshua, with the same desperation and anxiousness as one who has a chayla mesukin in his home and he's waiting for the doctor's arrival. But let's take the story but the doctor, one of the family members decides to go to the train station to be makabel panim when the doctor shows up. And there's only one train a day that comes from the doctor's town to that of the chayla. That family member stands there looking at the oncoming train. He sees the lights from a distance. The excitement is growing. The adrenaline is flowing. And finally the train comes to a halt. And the passengers begin to disembark. One by one they come streaming out of the train. But the doctor is nowhere to be found. He suddenly realizes the doctor didn't make this train. And in an instant, all of his hopes and aspirations come crashing down to earth. Chazal tell us that Tisha B'Av is the birthday of Mashiach. At Chatzos Hayoim, when the Heichal HaKodesh was set ablaze, that was the very moment when the seeds of Geula were planted, when Mashiach was born. And it's not just a one-time event. Each and every year, Chatzos Hayoim on Tisha B'Av, the seeds of the coming year's Geula are sown. And the Nitzitz of Mashiach is born. A year ago today, Tisha B'Av Tafshin Ayin Hey, the train left the station. And that train was supposed to deliver us the Geula. And we stand here today, Tisha B'Av Tafshin Ayin Vav. Our gaze is fixed at the doors of the train. And the last of the passengers has disembarked. But Mashiach is nowhere to be found. Today we let out a krechts. Today we express our disappointment over our shattered dreams and expectations. This is the Avelis of Tisha B'Av. This is something that every Yid can relate to. Someone who is properly mitzapeh Yeshua. Someone who at the end of last year Tisha B'Av took his kinnis and he put it in Shemus. Someone who dared dream. Someone who allowed himself to get swept up in the utopian image of the Zman HaGeula. When he reaches another Tisha B'Av, he's crushed. He experiences the tsar of Meisoi Mutal Lefanov. The mace is not just the Beis HaMikdash. The mace is our very own hearts that have been deflated. The mace is our ruach that had been flying high all year round, that has suddenly come down for a crash landing, when once again we have to sit down on the floor. We dim the lights and we lay with a broken heart. Eicha Yoshva Vadod. Eicha Yoshva Vadod. Ha'ir Abbasiyam. Ha'isa ki almana, sagt Rashi. Ki almana v'loy almana mamish. We're not compared to a widow who lost her husband forever. We're compared to a woman whose husband has disappeared, but is destined to return. Well, that brings with it an aspect of nechama and a tinge of hope. But at the very same time, that very source of nechama brings with it a constant pain and disappointment. Because just as in the Chafetz Chaim's mashal, the family members' gazes are affixed to the door, waiting for the doctor's arrival, so too, this woman is constantly staring at the door, waiting for her husband's return. And with each false alarm, she once again experiences that raw pain of Mesoi Mutal Lefanov. And it's all merumas in day one. That first faithful Leil Tisha B'Av, the night that it was Nigzera on Klal Yisrael, all of the subsequent cries of Leil Tisha B'Av. When the Meraglim came back from their mission, and they gave their report about their Eretz Yisrael, steht in Posik, Vayivku ha'am ba'laylo hahu, and the Gemara in Tainus tells us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response was, Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam, you cried for nothing. Ani kevei lachem b'chiyah l'deiros, I'll give you what to cry about. That very same b'chiyah that Klal Yisrael wept that first night, that what was nigzera on Klal Yisrael, the Deiros. What was that first b'chiyah? What did they cry about? They didn't shed tears of a treasure that was snatched before their eyes. They didn't weep over a loss at all. Their cries were that of shattered dreams and dashed expectations. From their first encounter with Moshe Rabbeinu, they were promised Eretz Zavas Cholav Udvash. They were promised the most beautiful land on earth to call home. They had it been Messiah from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They yearned for it. They dreamt about it. They dreamt about its beauty. They dreamt about its prosperity. They dreamt about its kedusha. And they dreamt about calling it their own. And then the Meraglim showed up. The Meraglim gave them a whole different picture. Its Paris are Meshunah. Its inhabitants are unconquerable. And in an instant, all of their dreams and aspirations were shattered before their very eyes. And they wept. They wept l'chinam. Because in truth, toiva ha'aretz ma'od ma'od. But in return, HaKadosh Baruch Hu punished us with a bechiyah l'deiros. L'deiros. Not just the bechiyah of the actual night of the Churban, but the bechiyah of all of the subsequent Tisha B'Avs that we were to experience. The avelos that we go through every year on Tisha B'Av, the avelos of the shattered dreams and dashed expectations. But Klal Yisrael has already experienced so many disappointments, so many false Mashiachs, so many Tisha B'Avs. And we've already become numb. We're like the woman who's lost child after child and baby after baby. We don't feel it the same anymore. Although this may be the sad reality, but Chazal tell us that this is the wrong attitude. Ani ma'amin be'emunah shleima b'vias ha'mashiach v'af al pi sheyisma'meya Im kol zeh, achak eloi, b'chol yom sheyavosh. It's the only one of the 13 animamins that does not only consist of a belief, but it also comes along with an emotion, with a tzipiyah, with an anticipation. The Biskarav explains that if someone believes be'emunah shalema that the geula is around the corner, he can't help but get excited. He can't help but anticipate. To the degree that he believes, that's the extent of his anticipation and his dreaming. And this is the job of a Yid. Not to allow our spirits to get crushed. To keep on dreaming. To keep on hoping. To keep on getting excited. And although this may set us up for a potential fall, but we're ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim, we don't think about the fall. Because we believe be'emunah shalema b'chol yom sheyavoy. And this is perhaps one of the most challenging avodas of Tisha B'Av. On the one hand, it's a day of disappointment, a day of avelus. But on the other hand, it's also the birthday of Mashiach. Today, Chatzos Hayom, when the Beis Hamikdash was set on fire, the seeds of this coming year's Geula have been planted. It's in place. And for this reason, the Svarim say that Chatzos Hayom, the pinnacle of the Tsar, dafka then we show signs of Nechama. We get up off the floor because the Geula has potentially begun. The Be'er Heitev brings from the Arizal that the minig is to push off Kiddush Levana until after Tisha B'Av. Because Kiddush HaLevana is symbolic of the Kiddush of Malchus Beis David. Tisha B'Av is the birthday of Mashiach ben David. It's immediately followed by Kiddush HaLevana. Immediately we're Mechazek our Amunah. We strengthen our vision of the Geula. And today is the day that we need it most. Because today is the day of the Churban. Today we are most susceptible to be miyayish. Today, more than any other day, we have to be mechazek our amunah. Strengthen that vision of Geula. And this refreshed vision of Geula, this chizik of amunah, is itself a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because Tzipir Yeshua, as the Rav mentioned before, it's not just a mitzvah, it's not just a chiv. It's the very foundation of the Geula Ho'asidah. The Medrash in Eicha tells us, Omer Ribono Shel Olam, Yitzchak Avinu, Im Yesh Dor Shemitzapim L'Malchusi, Miyad Heim Negolim. All we have to do is be mitzapeh and the Geula will come miyad. 3 times a day, we're mispalel to the Eibishter, Es Semach David Avdecha, Meheres Hatzmiach, V'karnoi Torem B'Shua Secha. Why? Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayoim. Zok de chida. Ki lishuascha kivinu kol hayoim. Because we're mekave, we're metzape for the Yeshua, kol hayoim, all day, every day. That's why we have the confidence. And that's why we have the ability to be mispalach. Esemach David avdecha meheros hatzmiach. He who is metzape, he is the one who merits seeing the Yeshua. About 100 years ago, in a small town in Poland called Skiernovich, there lived a heilig Yid by the name of Reb Shimon from Skiernovich. He was the Rav of the town, he was the Rebbe, and all of the townsfolk would flock to him to unload their burdens, their peklach, their tzoros. One day, a Yid comes to Reb Shimon to tell him about his own personal sorrow. His daughter had gotten caught up with the wrong crowd, and she began mingling with the goyish young men of the city. One thing led to another. And now, my daughter has her heart set on marrying one of these goyish young men. I try to knock some sense into her, but to no avail. We're not even on speaking terms anymore. And what's worse, she ran away from home. She locked herself up in a monastery in a neighboring town, and she plans on staying there until the date of their wedding, which is scheduled to take place 3 weeks from today. Reb Shimon was shaken to the core. But he didn't waste any time. Immediately he jotted down the information, her name, the name of the city, the name of the street where the monastery was located. And he sent the broken-hearted Yid home with a bracha and an assurance. I'll do everything I can to bring your daughter home. Reb Shimon called his gabbai, and they set out by horse and wagon to the town where the monastery was located. They arrived on a Thursday afternoon, and it was evident that they would be spending Shabbos in this strange town. Reb Shimon didn't look for an inn. He didn't seek out a host. Reb Shimon took out his paper. He found the address of the monastery. He parked his horse and wagon across the street from the monastery, and he told his gabbai, this is where we're going to spend Shabbos. But how would they communicate to this girl? Two very Jewish-looking individuals would not be allowed entrance into the monastery. Reb Shimon flagged down a young Goyish boy. He waved a few coins in front of his eyes. He said, come here, young boy. He handed him an envelope. And he told the boy, take this envelope, bring it into the monastery, and deliver it to the Jewish girl who's locked up in there. The boy took the money. He took the envelope. He went into the monastery. A few moments later, he left and went on his way. The gabbai was so curious. Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu. What was in that envelope? Was it a kameya? Was it Sirufei Shemus? Was it some kind of school? What was it? What was it? Reb Shimon said, no, nothing of the sort. I wrote her a letter. My letter said, Shimon Novskinovich is waiting in the wagon across the street, and I'm not going home without you. And then they waited, and waited, and waited. Shabbos came, Shabbos went. They waited. Snow started falling. They waited. The temperature dropped to frigid levels. They waited. The Rebbe didn't even want to sleep. He took shift with the gabbai. In case at any given moment the girl would come out of the monastery, someone should be up to have a conversation with her, to convince her to come home. Day in, day out, a week passed. And it was once again Thursday afternoon. The gabbai was growing impatient. The thought of spending another Shabbos away from home. And then it happened. The girl came bursting out of the monastery, calling out to Reb Shimon, okay, I'm coming home. She hopped onto the wagon, and Reb Shimon left the town with his treasure, his prize, the Yiddish neshama, snatched from the clutches of Gehenna. And when they were on their way, Reb Shimon turned to this young girl and he asked her, why the change of heart? What made you come home? The girl said, well, I'll tell you the truth. When you first showed up, when you first sent that letter, I knew my father sent you, and my father doesn't understand me. I was determined to stick to my guns. I was not coming home. But then I saw you waiting and waiting. I saw how much tsar you were going through, The snow was falling. The temperatures were freezing. And I saw you were still waiting. I saw you weren't going home without me. And it got me thinking about my family at home. And I was being Messiah. My family sitting around the table, waiting and waiting for my return. I saw in my mind all of my family members, their gazes, their ears, fixated at the door, waiting to hear my knock. I felt their pain. And I felt their pain, and I felt their pain, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I had to come home with you. This is how Tzipili Yeshua brings the Geula. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees us waiting, and waiting, and waiting, He sees that we parked our wagon, and we won't go on with our regular lives until He comes home. When He sees how much tsar we're in, how much we're waiting for Him to come home, then eventually the floodgates of Rahmanas break open, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, I'm coming home. I'm coming back to my family. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's home is the Beis HaMikdash, and His family is us. All we have to do is wait. And waiting, it begins with dreaming. It begins with emunah, it begins with hopes. And those hopes begin today, Tisha B'Av Tafshin Ayin Vav, because today is the birthday of Mashiach. Today, the Geula of this coming year has been set up. The seeds have been planted. Today, the train has left its station. If we would only take out a moment of our busy schedules, if we would take out a moment to dream once again, if we would take out a moment to get excited about those dreams, if we would take out a moment to stop dreaming about the mundane, if we would take out a moment to stop dreaming about the trivial, to stop dreaming about the little things, if we would take out that moment and dream about the Geula Hasidah and get excited about it, if we would take a moment to visualize the headlines in the newspapers, if we would take a moment to picture that beautiful, sweet moment when the entire world wakes up and they realize with absolute certainty, Hashem Echad U'Shmo Echad. If we would visualize for a moment all of the Umas Ha'olam declaring in unison, all of their leaders declaring, Hashem HaTzadik, V'ani V'ami HaRishoim. If we would picture for a moment that beautiful moment when the entire world screams out, V'peh echad, Moshe emes, v'seirasai emes. Just one moment a day, it would transform us into entirely different people. And then we'd already be well on our way to see the realizations of our dreams, to see them come true with our own eyes. V'sechazenu einenu, v'shuvcha l'tzion berachamim, v'vias goyel tzedek, m'herov yomeinu amen.
says in the Torah Kedusha, Shalosh be'amim b'shana yeroe kol zechurcha lifnei Hashem Elokecha b'chag ha'matzos b'chag ha'shvuos b'chag ha'sukkos. Always had a question. In the Torah there's 5 Yom Tovim. Besides Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, we have Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And the Torah doesn't say, come to the Beis HaMikdash a few days early and watch the Kohen Gadol. Watch the Shani HaMelubin. And the Gemara says in Sukkah that the Rabbeinu Shalom tells us, Im ata tovai el beisi, ani avai el beisecha. Ve'im ein ata ba el beisi, ani ba el beisecha. The Rebbeinu Shalom says 3 times a year, come to my house, habayis hagadol ve'akadosh. And 2 times a year I come to you. I come to your house. I come to your heart. Dirshu Hashem behemotza kra'uhu ve'yosei korav. The Rabbanu Shalom 7 weeks from tonight is going to come to your house and to my house, to your heart and to my heart. We have to imagine, as Feivel said, our Malach is going to see the Rabbeinu Shalom coming from the 7th Rakia.
Is nowhere to be found. Crashing down to earth. Tisha B'Av. Was said 100 years ago, the Rabbeinu Shalom with billions of malachim is going to come down. And it's going to come to us, an oil hanu yom adin, and the Rabbanu Shalom is going to come to us, and we're going to be dipping the apple in the honey. Aloivshim levanim, umischasim levanim, betuchim, we're going to come in betuchim, we're going to be successful. There's nowhere to be found. Crashing down to earth. Tisha B'Av. Was said that when Mashiach every year are sown. Today, train left the station, and that train was supposed to deliver us the Gula. And we stand here today, Tisha B'Av, Tafshin Ayin Vav. Our gaze is fixed at the doors of the train. And the last of the passengers has disembarked. But Mashiach is nowhere to be found. Today we let out a krechts. Today we express our disappointment over our shattered dreams and expectations. This is the Avelis of Tisha B'Av. This is something that every Yid can relate to. Someone who is properly mitzapeli Yeshua. Someone who at the end of last year Tisha B'Av took his kinnis and he put it in Shemus. Someone who dared dream. Someone who allowed himself to get swept up in image of the Zman. when he reaches another Tisha B'Av, he's crushed. He experiences the tsar of Meisoi Mutal Lefanov. The mace is not just the Beis HaMikdash. The mace is our very own hearts that have been deflated. The mace is our ruach that had been flying high all year round, that has suddenly come down for a crash landing, when once again we have to sit down on the floor. We dim the lights, and we lay with a broken heart. Eicha Yoshva Vadod. Eicha Yoshva Vadod. Ha'ir Abbasiyam. Ha'isa ki almana, sagt Rashi. Ki almana v'loy almana mamish. We're not compared to a widow who lost her husband forever. We're compared to a woman whose husband has disappeared, but is destined to return. Well, that brings with it an aspect of nechama and a tinge of hope. But at the very same time, that very source of nechama brings with it a constant pain and disappointment. Because just as in the Chafetz Chaim's mashal, the family members' gazes are affixed to the door, waiting for the doctor's arrival, so too, woman, waiting for her husband's return. And with each false alarm, she once again experiences that raw pain of Meisoi Mutal Lefanov. And it's all merumas in day one. That first faithful Leil Tisha B'Av, the night that it was Nigzera on Klal Yisrael, all of the subsequent cries of Leil Tisha B'Av. When the Meraglim came back from their mission, and they gave their report about their Eretz Yisrael, steht in Posik vayivku ha'am ba'laylo hahu, and the Gemara in Tainus tells us HaKadosh Baruch Hu's response was, Atem b'chisem b'chiyah shel chinam. You cried for nothing. Ani kevei lachem b'chiyah l'deiros. I'll give you what to cry about. That very same b'chiyah that Klal Yisrael wept that first night, that what was nigzera on Klal Yisrael l'deiros. What was that first b'chiyah? What did they cry about? They didn't shed tears of a treasure that was snatched before their eyes. They didn't weep over a loss at all. Their cries were that of shattered dreams and dashed expectations. From their first encounter with Moshe Rabbeinu, they were promised Eretz Zavas Cholav Udvash. They were promised the most beautiful land on earth to call home. They had been Messiah from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They dreamt about it. They dreamt about its beauty. They dreamt about its prosperity. They dreamt about its kedusha, and they dreamt about calling it their own. And then the Meraglim showed up. Its Paris are Meshunah. Its inhabitants are unconquerable. And in an instant, all of their dreams and aspirations were shattered before their very eyes. And they wept. Because it's the bechiyah l'deiros, not just the bechiyah of the actual night of the Churban, but the bechiyah of all the subsequent Tisha B'Avs that we were to experience. The avelos that we go through every year on Tisha B'Av, the avelos of expectations. But Klal Yisrael has already experienced so many disappointments, so many false Mashiachs, so many Tisha B'Avs. and we'd have already become numb. We're like the woman who's lost child after child and baby after baby. But this is the wrong attitude. אני מאמין באמונה שלמה בביאת המשיח. ואף על פי שישמעיה, עם כל זה, אחכה לו, בכל יום שיבוא. It's the only one of the 13 animamins that does not only consist of a belief, but it also comes along with an emotion. Horav explains that if someone believes be'emunah shalema that the is around the corner, he anticipates. To the degree that's the extent of anticipation and his dreaming. And this is the not to allow our hoping. Hey, the seeds of this coming year have been planted. And for this reason, the pinnacle of the Tsar, the Geula has potentially begun. That the minig is to push off Yeshiva. Because of the Chiddush, Malchus Beis David. It's immediately by Chiddush Halavana, the Geula. And today is the day most. Today is the Durban. Today is susceptible to be miyayish. Today stop him the
in the din, but how could we be successful in the din? How sure can we be that the Rabbeinu Shalom is going to come to our hearts? Then anachnu yachaylim lerois v'shtachvos lefanecha. We couldn't go to the Beis HaMikdash. We didn't go Pesach. We didn't go Shmuas. We didn't go Sukkos. Mipnei hayad shenishtalcha b'mikdosha. Hayad is yod al dakol. Yimach shemam the Arabs who was sitting in the Makam HaMikdash in Al-Aqsa Mosque. So I didn't go to your house, Rabbeinu Shalom, but I want you to come to my house. And the Rabbeinu Shalom says, Anus Rachmana Patre. There is no Beis HaMikdash, but that's not enough Rachmana Patre. We need Commando Ovid, but we can tell the Rabbeinu Shalom that I spent 3 weeks. Instead of the 3 Yomim Tovim are going with the Eilah, with the Korban, with the Shlomim to the Beis HaMikdash. I said 3 weeks I cried, and I was in Avelis, and I dreamt. As Rabbi Levin said, Machshava Tova Mitzarefes. The Rebbeinu Shalom comes on the night of Rosh Hashanah and he says to us, and the Zohar HaKodesh says it's so important that on Rosh Hashanah our whole tefillah is about the Beis HaMikdash. And if we don't internalize today the importance of davening for the Shekhinah, the understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is homeless, and we go ask him for our house, as Zohar HaKodesh says, you're a dog. Now my words, have, give me. Why should I give you? Did you worry about me? And if we go to the Rebbeinu Shalom says, yeah, I mourned the 3 weeks. And the 3 weeks are up, but the 7 weeks are beginning tonight. The tefillah for Mashiach is not up, it's not finished. I'm going to continue. It's not going to be Shabbos Nachamu, it's all over, put on the music and forget about it. But every day I'm going to think of Mashiach. Kol hayom achake Eloi sheyovai. The Rebbeinu Shalom will say, you're worried about my base and mikdash, I worry about your house. And there's no question that every year we're bringing the Mashiach closer. Sima d'masi ben oidecha haloi besifrosecha. The Rebbeinu Shalom has a barrel of tears of Klal Yisrael. And the tears of the Doros have filled that barrel. Maybe we need only a few more drops. And we have to know that every year Mashiach is closer. And we have to believe that we brought Mashiach closer. And Yirush is Shalom Edas, not to give up. That was the chet of the Meraglim. The Meraglim started Tisha B'Av. They said Ephes impossible, and the Yid says we never say impossible. It's always possible. And we brought Mashiach closer, and every tefillah for Mashiach stops. A lot of tragedies are happening around the world. Saw a story. The magazine. A lady was nifter last month. This lady was married in 1947, and her husband gave her a beautiful gold bracelet. And her children and grandchildren saw the picture of that bracelet and all the engagement pictures, but they never saw her wearing it. And they always asked her about the bracelet, and she would not answer. And she was nifter last month. And then the children were going through her closet. And finally they found in the back of her closet a velvet box. In an embroidered bag. And the bracelet was nestled inside a small box, still in a velvet bed, the way it was bought. It was shining like the day was given in 1947. And there was a handwritten note inside the box, dated Parshas Chayesora 5772, 4 years ago. The day she got word that she has the machla. And this is, I have a picture of the note in Yiddish, translated into English. B'siyata d'shmaya, I received this bracelet from my chassan when we got engaged. And it means very much to me, because it is so precious. I decided not to wear it and to set it aside to donate it to the Beis HaMikdash when it's rebuilt, maybe soon. This is the emunah of a Pashta woman who was just nifter last month. And the Chofetz Chaim says, Rav Matasyahu, our Mashgiach, Hashem, give him refuah shleima, let us all say Amen. He brings from the Chofetz Chaim. He says, if Mashiach comes and there is a collection to build a Beis HaMikdash, or we're called upon to give, everybody would give. Donate a stone, an archway, a pillar. We all want to give. But when Mashiach comes, we're not going to need our money. But all the Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to do is to stop the sinas chinam, to stop the lashon hara. And if we want Mashiach to come, we got to do something about it. The Rambam says, and the Mishnah Berurah brings it lahalacha, that if a person is Masana and a Tainis and he forgets to do tshuva, tofes hatofel b'shachach ha'ikar. The ikar of a Tainis is to do tshuva, to undo the reason for the chorban, to do Ahavas Yisrael, to get close to each other. The Gemara says that Yimach Shemo Espasianos heard from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he's going to be the emperor. And a messenger then came from Rome and told him that the Roman Senate voted to have him become the next emperor. He just found out he's the strongest person in the world. He had one shoe on, one shoe off. He couldn't take off the one shoe, he can put on the next shoe. And he asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai what's going on. He told him, Shmua Teivet Edoshen Gorem. You heard good news, and that's why your bones expanded, and that's why you cannot take the shoe off. So he asked him, what do I do? He says, I have a simple solution. Simple solution. I know it's going to work. What should I do? Bring somebody who you don't like to pass in front of you. No question, your bones are going to come back to shape. Sure enough, he brought one person he doesn't like, passed in front of him, and his bones contracted. This is what Sinas Chinim does. That's what Lashon Hara does. If Sinas Chinim could take a person who just heard the greatest news in the world, he was just elected the president of the United States, and all of a sudden just one guy he doesn't like passes in front of him, takes it all away. If that's what it does to bones, what does it do to the veins? What does it do to the heart? How many heart attacks does it cause? And how many strokes does it cause? And how much do we have a responsibility to love and to care? And it's easy to love somebody who agrees with you. It's easy to love somebody who thinks like you. But anybody who's Aise Maaseh Amcha, if you hate him, if you dislike him, if you don't like him like you like yourself, Sinas Chinim, Rashi says that. That's why Sinas Chinim. I saw a story. The Baal Koira of the Belzer Rebbe, Rabbi Yisrael Klein was nifter. And of course everybody came to be Menachem Oval. And there was a gentleman who came in, nobody knew him, made his way towards the Avelim in the front row. And he said, I want to tell you a story about your father. And the story was many, many years ago, and he was speaking in pain. He says, I was in concentration camp with your father, Alav Shalom. I was about 16 years old, and I was hungry, and I was searching desperately for a scrap of food. I couldn't find a thing. And I was terrified that I would die from hunger. As I was going from place to place, I saw another fellow, a few years older than I, also searching for the same thing, and that's Rabbi Yisrael Klein, your father. He came over to me and said, what are you looking for? I'm starving, I told him. I need some food. Anything. Could you give me anything? A scrap of food. He looked at me with forlorn eyes and said, I too am looking for food, but I haven't found any. Then he came close to me and took me in his arms and embraced me. This is what I could give you, he said, a hug. Because I love you. Because I love you. And I love you because you're a Yid. And remember that the Rabbeinu Shalom also loves you just because you're a Yid. The gentleman dabbed his eyes from tears, and he struggled to continue after the Mulchama. I went through many difficult times. And my Yiddishkeit, my religious convictions teetered, they were shaky. But I always remembered his warm embrace and special words to me that day. That kept me going. Eventually I came to Eretz Yisrael and I settled here. I remained from only because of that hug. How wonderful it would be if we could each hug somebody who disagrees with us. How wonderful it would be if we work on controlling Lashon Hara. Pasuk says, Hamchase ani me Avram es asher ani oiseh. The Rabbeinu Shalom says, I have to tell Avram that I'm going to destroy Sodom. And Avram comes and bargains with the Rabbeinu Shalom. Hashayfet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat chalila lecha me'asas hadavar hazeh, to kill tzaddikim Rasha. Why does Rabbeinu Shalom tell Avram, I'm going to destroy Sodom? Rabbeinu Shalom knows that he's not going to be mekabel Avram's tefillah. So why do it? But the Rabbeinu Shalom wanted Avram to daven. He wanted him to daven. Sodom wasn't saved, but from that tefillah, light was saved. The light was a big deal. Light was Mashiach. Matzasi David Avdi Heichen Me'etzosev B'Sodom. So Mashiach came from that tefillah, the tefillah that wasn't accepted. But more than that, it says Avram Tiken Shachris. And what does it mean, Avram Tiken Shachris? It says Avram David not only Shachris but Mincha and מעריב, but Tiken Lebonav. And the Lev Eliyahu Rabbi Eli Alapian Alav Shalom says Tiken Lebonav means that a Yid opens the siddur and the tefillah travels all the way to the Rekiya Ashvi. How does that work? Avram Tiken Shachris and Yitzchak Tiken Mincha and Yaakov Tiken מעריב. How is he misaken? When we make a phone call, it's not just a little phone that gets our voice to go to Yerushalayim, but spacecrafts were sent up, and there's relay towers, and billions of dollars were invested in that phone call. Avram Avinu sent up the spacecraft. He made the relay towers that our tefillah should be accepted. And when did that happen? When Vayosh came Avram b'boker el hamokem. When was Avram? When did he have the ability to make this nace of a tefillah shachris accepted for doires? When after he got up, Vayosh came Avram b'boker, and he saw that the storm that destroyed Sodom, the fire that came up from Sodom, he saw his tefillah wasn't accepted, and his argument wasn't accepted, and his Mesiras Nefesh for Sodom was not accepted, but he didn't give up. You didn't give up, you stay davening. Avram Tiken Shachar said, Yidden, don't give up. There's a powerful quote from a gifter, a Mordechai gifter, alav shalom. And the quote is, in this world, there are no lazy men, only pessimists. In this world, there are no lazy men, only pessimists. As we come to Yom Noraim, as we finish the 3 weeks and we go into the 7 weeks of Nechama and the 2 weeks of Tshuva, and we go towards Hoshana Rabbah, when we say, Kol mevaser ve'omer, a person should not be a lazy man. A person should not be a pessimist. A person should not be like the Meraglim to say, Ephes. No, it's not impossible. It is possible. And Tefillah works, and we don't give up on Tefillah. And Kaveh, we keep davening. Today is the yahrzeit. Today is the yahrzeit of a very great leader, Don Yitzchak Abravanel. The Barbanel was nifter 508 years ago today. And Yudov, the Barbanel went and spoke to Yimach Shemai, the king and queen of Spain, and they insisted on getting Sfarad, and they were given 3 months to leave Sfarad. And the last day was Tisha B'Av, 16 years before the Abarbanel's Ptira. And the Abarbanel and the Gdolim of the door told the Gerusha Sfarad to go out, though they were going out, the bulk went out during the 3 weeks to go with music, to go sing, because Yidden don't give up. Yidden don't say Ephes. There's a halacha, the Meiri brings, the Sefer HaMichtam brings, the Orchos Chaim brings, Beis Yosef mentions it, that there was a minhag in the days of the Geonim that women washed their hair in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av. And it's a pele, it's also to wash during the 9 days. And the Meiri said there was Al Pi Haskanim, they told him to do it, because to be mechazek the emunah of the women that Mashiach is born in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av. And the Beis Yosef says, Ishtoka hadover v'lo yomer, don't do it. Also to do it. And the Chidah says, but they should still do, they should make the beds, they should straighten out the house in the afternoon to be mechazek the emunah. Rav Avadia alav hashalom, he says today, Baruch Hashem, women go to the Beis Yaakov, they have the emunah Mashiach, they don't need to do that. But there was a takana to do such a thing, to be mechazek the emunah, to believe that Bainei Yerushalayim Hashem, not that Hashem built Yerushalayim, but He's building Yerushalayim. Hinei anochi sholeach lachem es Eliyahu Hanovi, not Eshlach b'sholeach. I want to share with you a story that I know firsthand that happened to my father-in-law, alav hashalom, who lived through Auschwitz. He and my mother-in-law, both of them had the tattooed numbers on their arms. When they went into Auschwitz, the numbers on their arms added up to Chai, to 18, and they had the bitochen that they will live through. And Baruch Hashem, they lived through, and they brought Doris Yesharim. And he wrote a book, some 400 pages long, and I want to conclude with this story. He says that one day he was contacted by the Joint Distribution Committee, and he says there was a Yid looking for him. When he called the Yid, he says this Yid lives in Paris, Mr. Steinsteiner, and he's been trying to track my father-in-law down. He traced him back to Poland and to Germany, and he wondered if he's in America, and he sent looking for him in America. My father-in-law wrote to him, and he got a letter from this person, Mr. Steinsteiner. Listen to a letter that my father-in-law writes in his book. To my dear unforgettable friend Moshe Leizerovich, when we bade farewell to each other in Bachur several weeks after liberation, I asked you to accompany me to Paris, but you said you'd be traveling to your birthplace, Sosnovitz, in order to look for any survivors from your family. I left for Paris feeling quite dejected. Since I've been with you in Auschwitz, you always had a good word for me. I felt very lonely without you. I had a wife, I had children, I lost it all, and I felt utterly alone in the world. My father-in-law was with him in Auschwitz, and he kept saying how he had a wife and he had children. And people saw that they were taken to the gas chambers. My father-in-law told him, he says, unless you saw it in your own eyes, don't believe it. And other people spoke discouragingly and repeatedly said to that those who were dead were better off than us, for we were first being worked to the bone, and then we will all end up in the gas chambers anyway. My father-in-law told the people that they would survive, and we should keep our bitochen up, and don't be pessimists. And due to my father-in-law's optimism, he says, I made many friends. The letter continues, I arrived in Paris quite early in the day. I found a place to stay that was prepared specially for the refugees. I decided to visit the house where I had lived happily with my wife and children. Perhaps the French neighbors will be able to give me some information about what happened to my wife and children, Aleim Shalom. I thought. I took the subway, entered the house. It was too early in the morning to knock on any doors. Everyone was still sleeping. I paced up and down in front of the building. All the memories came flooding back. I remembered the happy years before the war, before the Germans invaded France and destroyed my life. We often went into hiding to avoid the frequent roundups by the Germans in Shemom. We lived in fear, but we were hopeful that the war would end quickly. However, one day in 1942, I was arrested and sent to a collection point in Dronsny. And from there, I was taken to Auschwitz. I was walking up in front of the house, passing the time, thinking of the past, until I decided the time is now to ring the bell of one of the neighbors. Went up to the second floor where I had lived. I passed the door to my old apartment, but I didn't knock on the door. Instead, I knocked on another door and rang the bell. No one answered. I turned back to my own door and started knocking, even though I knew that the new residents who took over my apartment wouldn't be able to give me any information about my family. And after I knocked on the door, I heard footsteps approaching the door. The door opened. You can imagine the shock when I saw the person who opened the door was none other than my wife. She saw me and she screamed hysterically, Chaim, and fell to the floor and she fainted. I entered the apartment and upon seeing my children, I also fainted. My children quickly called for help and both of us were revived. The doctor stayed with us for a while to make sure that we both got back to ourselves. I embraced my children and all of us cried tears of joy together. All our neighbors from the top and bottom floors came running. It was truly very moving to see our family reunited. We simply couldn't calm down and everyone cried with us, but those were joyous tears. And he says to my father-in-law, I remembered the kind words you said to me in Auschwitz. I shouldn't believe that my wife and children were on the transport that was taken to the gas chambers. I owe you so much due to your encouragement. I retained my sanity and had the strength to persevere because of you. I didn't perish from hunger and cold. Be'ez Hashem, in a Yom Boim, we're going to see Hayinu Kecholmim, we're going to see Mashiach Tzidkenu, we're going to sing and dance in the streets, but the main thing is Tisha B'Av is over, 3 weeks are over, but we have 7 weeks coming. We have to keep the bitochen and the emunah and the tefillah and the tears. And Be'ez Hashem, when we think of the Rabbeinu Shalom's house, he will think of our house. He'll give us all the brachas, Shana, Tova, U'Mesukeh, Be'ez Hashem for us and all the people. Amen.
It's 8:24. The Ran, in his droshes, says that the Ribono Shel Olam ingrained in Esav from birth a sinah to Klal Yisrael, and the purpose why the Ribono Shel Olam made Esav hate Yaakov is in order that Klal Yisrael should have somebody who is going to Rachmana Litzlan be the Shevet Apoy, the Shevet of the Evra of the Ribono Shel Olam. And throughout the ages, people were baffled why all this anti-Semitism. And the Ran tells us the Ribono Shel Olam set up the world in that way. He made it there should be an Esav that hates Yaakov till the Achris Hayomim, till the Geula, till Moshiach comes. It's in the Bria. It's a part and parcel the way the Ribono Shel Olam set up the world. That if Cholila Klal Yisrael doesn't do what they're supposed to do, the Ribono Shel Olam has an Esav that stands up against Yaakov, and he's merely a shliach of the Ribono Shel Olam. But what's perplexing is, in the last 100 years, we've seen Sinas always grow to such proportions from never before. Rachmana Litzlan, they shechted ois with such uxorious 6 million people. It's unheard of, such a tremendous rishis, and it's a siman min hashamayim that the Ribono Shel Olam had to give such a peronius to Klal Yisrael. And the Meforshim question this. Rabbi Chonon writes in his Kovetz Igris, why did the Ribono Shel Olam bring such a sinah? What is our chet, he says, more than the previous generations? The sinah keeps on growing from year after year. Today we're living through a matzav where publicly the whole world is not ashamed to talk about. They hate us. The sinah is shivim zevim, trying to devour one kivseh. What is the shoyrish of all this sinah, Rabbi Chonon asks? And he says the answer is, Torah tells us, Vayisorvu bagoyim vayilmedu mimaaseyem. Throughout the course of Golis, the tendency is you're mushpeh from your svivas. And we mingle with the goy, and we try to follow and emulate the lifestyles around us of the goyish world. And he says this is what the Novi Yecheskel said 3,000 years ago. The Novi says, V'oila al ruchachem, what you will think, hoyoy loisiya atem oimim niye kagoyim. We want to emulate and follow the lifestyles of the goyish world around us, their values, their dress, their culture, their ashkofis. This will not be, the Novi says, Im loy biyot chazoka ubezroya netuya ubechemo shmuche. There will be a tremendous wrath of the Ribono Shel Olam if we try to get close to the goyish lifestyles. Rabbi Chonon brings some Reb Chaim Brisker. There's a tremendous havdolah from a yid and a goy. A yid and a goy is two welten. There's no connection and no shaykhs. It's like the havdolah that we say, bein or lechoshech. And when the Ribono Shel Olam made this bria of or and choshech, he made a big separation between the two of a zman of bein hashmoshes. That or and choshech should be clearly separated, immensely separated. And the proportions of Reb Chaim of the way we try to get closer to the goy, that's how much the Ribono Shel Olam will push us away. And Rachmana litzlan, Reb Chaim says, when we try to get closer and closer to the goy, then the knock becomes much greater. Then the Rebbeinu Shalom gives us a chema shmuche, Rachmana litzlan, if we continue to follow the ways of the goy. There's a nifladi kemaimer from Yerucham, the Mashgiach of Mir, that he talks about people don't realize, it's subtle, people don't realize the ashboyas that they get from the surrounding neighborhoods where they live. We mix and we mingle with the goy in many ways, and through the course of history we got infected from the goy. And Rabbi Yerucham writes, it's Meir di Keverter, it's a shrek to say it, but he writes, there's nothing Jewish left in the Jewish nation. Everything we have, he said, we stole from the Goyish nation. Meir di Keverter for Rabbi Yerucham. Rabbi Yerucham says, I'm not talking about the actions, the ma'asim of the Yid, but what I'm talking about is the ashkafas of the world. The ashkafa of a Yid, that olam hazeh is the ikar. It used to be a Yid understood that Yankiv took lechelkoi olam haba, and the goy is given this world, this is his world to enjoy. And we seem to be jealous of the goy, not understanding what our tafkid is. The Eibishter created us, like the Mesil Shishorim says, Lisanei gal Hashem. Our tainug, our gishmak, our simcha is supposed to come totally from Ruchnius. And what happened, he says, we became a nation that got sucked into Olam Hazeh. We started believing Echol v'nishte. We should live and enjoy this world to the utmost, to try and get as much Olam Hazeh as possible. Where did this come from, Rabbi Yerucham says? This came because we followed the goy. We realized, look at the goy, what does he have in his life? He only has Olam Hazeh. It says that Esav was given this world for his chelek. If we try to rob our chelek away from him, we made a deal. There was a pact going on. We take Olam Haba, we told Esav, yours is Olam Hazeh. When we go away from our boundaries and we enter the world of Esav, Esav says, you're stealers. You're taking what's mine, what's given to me. The Eibishter set up one world for you and one world for me. What right do you have to take what's mine? I don't take your world, don't take my world. We agreed to it. Yaakov made that deal at the onset. They made a deal, mine is Olam Haba and yours is Olam Hazeh. And when we try to get after the mahalach of the goy, then Rachmana litzlan, Esav takes a stick, and the Eibusha tells him, give it to them, because they're taking what's not theirs. Ours is Ruchnius, ours is Olam Haba. Chazal, when they depict how Ikvisa the Mashiach is going to look, the Gemara tells us, and d'sa'mras'at, there'll be an abundance of wine. Hagefen, there'll be tremendous amounts of wines. There's so many wines. I remember when I was a small child, there was one wine to be gotten. Kedem produced one wine, Malage. There was nothing more to be gotten. And I remember then, after maybe 15, 20 years, Kedem came out with Concord grape, another wine, and that was it. Nobody dreamt that the world will become shicker from wine. Thousands and thousands of different wines, expensive wines, these types of wines. We sank into a sea of Olam Hazeh. Listen to what Rashi writes about Ikvus and Mashiach. Hakol oiskim b'mishtoyes. The world is going to be busy pottering grilling, barbecuing, all different tainuke olam hazeh, kulam roitfin achar hayayin umishtakrin. Everybody will be this fancy wine, that fancy wine. I'll give you a present, a choshev wine. This is the Asik, Rachmana Litzlan, of the Ikvus and the Mashiach. It doesn't stop. More wines and newer wines and all. You read the advertisements. You can get this wine. You can get that wine. They're constantly coming out with new wines. That's why we went in Golus. You know when Golus started? Golus started with Aseres Hashvotim. And the Medrash tells us, the Gemara tells us, why did we go on going Golus? Lo golu el mitoich achila ushtia. Ushalve, the Gemara says in Shabbos, they were busy going after the French wines. They were busy after the Chamra, the wine. This is what they were leaking in. And the Eibishter said, this is what you're busy with? Olam Hazeh, wines, moisris. The Eibishter sent them in Golus, and that was the beginning of the Golus of Klal Yisrael. And this is the matzav that Rachmana Litzlan, we're finding ourselves in the Zman of Ikvus and Mashiach. The Zohar writes in Parshas Bolek, man gormlu Yisrael to this indulgence in Olam Hazeh. Why is there such an indulgence in Olam Hazeh? And the Zohar says, because of the nations around us, Vayisorvu Bagoyim, Vayilmedu Mimaseyem. We stole the Mahalach HaChayim of the Goyish Welt. There's a mimer from Rav Shach. Rav Shach writes that the door before the Churban, the Nisayin, was Haskolah. But that's long ago. It lost its that nobody talks about anymore, these Yetzirah Haskolah. But he says what we have a Yetzirah today is our Nisayin is Moisris. That's the Nisayin of our generation. The Rebbeinu Shalom is going to give us a Shefa Rav of Gashmias. And this is where we're going to be overtaken by it. We're going to see so much Olam Hazeh in front of us, and it's going to make us feel a zika to it, a geshmak in it, and we're going to run after it. And that's the test of our generation, just of everybody understood, and now looks back at the Nisayin of the door, Haskolah. And today there's no more Yetzirah for that. Today's Nisayin, Dr. Shach, changed. And the Reb Chatzkel, the Mashgiach upon us, said the same thing. The Nisayin of our generation is Taivus Olam Hazeh. The Taivus Olam Hazeh is engulfing us from all sides. It's subtle, you don't realize it. But it becomes a zach, fancy houses, fancy cars, luxury vacations, cruises, whatever it is. We get so pulled into this slowly but surely because these are what's full in all magazines and from the magazines. What are they trying to tell us? What are they enticing us? Instead of being full with divrei kedusha, Torah, ruchnius, it's full of one advertising over another, outdoing another thing. One restaurant trying one takeout better than the other takeout. Who doesn't remember Lakewood didn't have one restaurant in it? And there was a fight from Reb Nosson not to allow a restaurant in Lakewood. And Rachmana Litzlan, today we have hundreds of restaurants, hundreds of eateries. B'nai Torah are going to sit in restaurants. That's the Mahalach of a Yiddish Leben. The Yiddish Leben is Ruchnius Olam Habeh. Not to be engulfed with Olam Hazeh. You know, there's a story. Somebody came into Reb Chaim Kanevsky, and he was worried about Ayin Horeh. And he was asking Reb Chaim, does he have to worry about Ayin Horeh? So he couldn't explain himself exactly what was it that he was
worried about Ayin Horus. So Reb Chaim didn't understand. He was asking him, are you such a big Talmid Chochem that there's something to be mekane in you? You know Shas Baal Peh. You know something that you feel that you may be too publicizing your Chochmeh, your Torah. And he's trying to tell Reb Chaim he wants to buy a Lexus. And Reb Chaim didn't know what a Lexus means. And they were trying to explain him a Lexus. And he wanted to know if he has to be worried about Kina. And then when they told Reb Chaim, he starts laughing. Such a narishkeit to buy a Lexus, that should be a Siba for Kina. Reb Chaim laughs. Rachmana litzlan, it was a very serious shaila nowadays. Reb Chaim could never fathom that this is Rachmana litzlan chshivas in this world. Driving a Lexus, having a fancy lifestyle, that's something to be mekane. Whoever dreamt that that should be a zach that Minchen should be mekane? Reb Chaim was still in the old world. Mekane, you're mekane, the chochmeh, the Torah, the avodas Hashem, the tzidkes, the gadlus. Or is that a siba to be ma'oira kina? But Nebuch, this is the matzav that we're in, that a balabos has to come to Reb Chaim with an ernst shaila. Is it going to affect me because people are going to be mekadeh my financial status? Whoa, wow, he made it. He's a rich man. He has a lot of olam hazeh with him. This is Rachmana litzlan, a matzav. Let me tell you an insight of something that's in the ikvus of the Mashiach. One of the things that's mentioned in the Mishnah and the Soita is Oivei ish anshe beisoi. A person's enemies is the children in his house. The family are your enemies. And this is mind-boggling. Oivei ish, if anything, the ones that love you the most are your family. These are the closest to you. Children, the family around you. And Chazal tell us your enemies are going to be in your household. The Mishnah first says, Bas kome b'ime kala b'chamoisa, and the Mishnah ben menavoloviv, and then it says, Oy ve'ish, they're an enemy to you. Oy ve'ish anshe beisa, and this is a phenomena that we're seeing today. Everything that's there in Chazal is 100% emes lamita that's nizgale b'doreinu, and we see it today taking place. Now, what is the shoyrish of this oy ve'ish anshe beisa? Now, there's a sefer Chavli Moshiach that gives an insight in what this is all about. And he says, you know something, the generations before us lived in such poverty. They were so poor, they couldn't barely put food on the table. They had to work endlessly, tirelessly around the clock. And it comes every week, they had problems with Shabbos, and they couldn't hold on a job, and everything was so difficult for them. And they lived with such a shvere leben. But they still had the gewaltige emunah b'Hashem. But then their children were deprived. Their children were brought up in such poverty, and they felt such a lack of, they didn't have anything. They just heard the parents saying, Oy wie schwer es ist zu sein ayit. When these parents grew up, the most important number one thing in their lives were they got to give their children a good life in this world. They suffered too much when they were children. And as they became older, the number one priority was to give. After we, Baruch Hashem, have so much, let's shower our children with whatever is possible, just to go to the opposite end. And we spoiled them. We gave them to no end. These parents who suffered when they grew up felt it so important. The number one thing is to see they have olam hazeh, and it came at the expense of their olam haba, of their ruchnius. They put such a dogus, my child, you want a toy, you want a present, you want a bike, you want this, you want that. Whatever I can give you, I'll give you. And we got them so used to having
that they got to a point that you couldn't even give them anything because they already had everything, and now they felt such a void and a vacuum in their life. They felt no satisfaction. You can't satisfy a Yid with giving him a little oilam hazeh, with trying to make him happy with a pleasure that's a fleeting pleasure of this world. It lasts a little bit and then it goes over. There's nothing that can take the place of ruchnius, of the simcha, of Torah, of avodas Hashem. But when they shortchanged their children wasn't used to be machshiv Torah, to be machshiv the simcha that comes from avodas Hashem, and they felt they have no tachlis in life. So what did they do? They went, Rachmana litzlan, to get some real happiness, and they went on drugs. We're living in a generation that children, Rachmana litzlan, are taking drugs. People are looking, and then Rachmana litzlan, they feel so depressed. We have so many psychiatrists and psychologists that grew and blossomed. What happened? Why is there so many psychological problems? The Stipler used to say it. When you didn't have, you lived ruchnius and you were satisfied with what you had, and they had simcha. But when you try to replace that with tainugim, with pleasures, it's an endless run after. You'll never be happy with what you have. And then you create yourself a matzav that you can't find satisfaction and happiness. It eludes you. This is the Rachmana litzlan, the oivei ish anshe beisoi. The children have tainas on their parents, and rightfully so. The Medrash says in Parsha Shmois, Choisek shiftoi soine benoi ve'oi avoi shicharoi moser. The Medrash says those parents that didn't want madrich them children properly and what the values in life is, if they weren't madrich them that Torah is what's important for a Yid, ruchnius is this, is what life is, a Yid is a life. This world is not our world, but our world is totally for avodas Hashem, lisanig al Hashem. When you try to give your children oilam hazeh and they can't find satisfaction, zok the Medrash, soifoy that your child will hate you. But if you like your child, the only thing you can do is instill in him the values of ruchnius, of kedusha. Don't try to make him indulge in oilam hazeh. Because when you try to make his world oilam hazeh, he'll never see a satisfaction in that world. And he'll always salute him until he'll have tainas on the parents. He'll hate his parents. Oy ve'ish is anshe beisoi. Because we're trying to give them satisfaction in a world that is not ours. In a world, don't feel deprived. Our Zaydis, our Bobis didn't feel deprived that they didn't have this world. They understood that this world is not our world. It isn't for us. Our world is oilam habe, and we don't have to run after the moisris of this world. You know, there's a very interesting observation from Rav Shach. He says in the Second World War, when they wiped out the Kemat the ganze Yiddishkeit, the Eines HaMizrach wasn't affected. Why weren't they affected? And Rav Shach says, you know what the reason is? Because the Eines HaMizrach did not mingle with the nations around them. They kept the Messiah in the way it was given. Oilam hazeh had no chshivas to them. They kept away from the goyim around them, and they didn't try to follow and emulate the goyim. They went away unscathed. They didn't have anti-Semitism. It sounds strange. All these nations living in all these countries that today are the biggest anti-Semites. They didn't hate them. They lived together with them. Why?
because they kept their distance. They kept together in their sviva. They kept isolated. They understood that we and the Goy are two worlds. But Rahman al-Islam, the Western Hemisphere, became enlightened, and they decided to follow the values of the Goyish world around them. When that happens, Rahman al-Islam, Ashoya, Rahman al-Islam, the Eibishter wipes out Kimat the world. For what? Because we're not in the right world. We're in Olam Hazeh, and that's not where we belong. We belong in Olam Haba. This is not our chelek. Our chelek is the chelek of Olam Haba. It bothers me to no end. We see so much Torah, so much avodah, so much chesed, kind of horror. Where you go, there's koilelim, there's yeshivas, there's shuls, there's bati midrashim. There's so much chesed. But you know, one thing is missing, and that is heart. Heart is missing. The Gemara talks in Eruvin that the hearts, the farther we go away from the door of Matan Torah, the hearts are very, very narrow, very small. But the feeling, the geschmack in Ruchnius is missing. You don't see the brand, the simcha in a davening. And the testimony to that is people come in late to davening. It's a normal phenomenon and it doesn't bother anybody. You can walk in around Borchu and it's a normal procedure. You're doing that every day. And then you could walk out before the end of davening. And then you could even find time, maybe Rahman al-Islam, to chapesh shmuas. That's a sign you don't have a tainuk in your davening. You don't have a tainuk in your ruchnis. You carry a cell phone into a seder. That means you don't feel, if you have the tremendous geschmack and the simcha from your learning, you can't be involved in anything else. Your mind has to be totally there. Your heart is there. You're lacking in your simcha, in your feeling, and we see it in the children. The children are Rahman al-Islam not feeling the simcha shel mitzvah, the simcha shel Torah, the simcha of avodas Hashem. And the reason is because we trained them from young to get a geschmack in Olam Hazeh. We treat them endlessly. We have, so we feel what's going to be bad if we treat them. Take them out to a restaurant. Why not? And then you'd say, why can't we go for a hotel for Yontif? Nobody dreamt about going to a hotel for Yontif. They couldn't afford it. But now, if I could afford it, let's take him for a hotel. What does that hotel do to you? It destroys the ruchnius of the Yontif. It makes it a goyish holiday. That's where it comes from. Go to a hotel. And Rahman al-Islam, when that happened, it struck me so much. Going to hotels for Yontif, how do we do that? Take away the Kedushas Azman of a Yontif to be busy in your house, that the house should be everything focusing around the Yontif, around the Kedusha, around the Seder, around the davening, around the learning, about all the mitzvahs of the Yontif. Instead, the focus becomes, where are we going? What excitement are we having? And every year you got to outdo it. You have to find another better hotel. The kids say, I already had that already. There's no excitement anymore. But Rahman al-Islam, if we don't put a stop, it's becoming a year-round affair, hotels. Hotels now became something that it's something you do Keseder. Keseder, another hotel and another hotel, trying to entice you. The magazines are full with them. The plate started with Pesach. And then it started, it's difficult to make a Pesach. And when that happened and it went by and nobody made a tumult about it, it continues to continue and continues throughout the year. Enjoy yourself. Take a weekend off here, and kasher it some way or another. This is goyish values. This is following the goy's hashkof of echo v'nishte. Enjoy this world to its utmost. Take out from this world as much olam hazeh, what we used to call in Yiddish, pregelin in olam hazeh. To bathe yourself in olam hazeh. This is what the world, Rahman al-Islam, has got to. We're infested with olam hazeh around us. Every magazine, every periodical, all it's full is this olam hazeh, whether it's food, whether it's hotels, whatever it is, get yourself more and more olam hazeh. We don't have olam hazeh. It doesn't belong to a Yid. Shnei Olomis, the Gemara says, were made. One was for the Goy and one was for the Yid. The more you run after Olam Hazeh, you lose your Simchas HaChayim and Olam Haba. This is in all the Svorim. In proportion as much as you stay away from Olam Hazeh, that's how much you're going to get and feel a tainug in a Simcha in Olam Haba. We have to work to break this obsession, and it's not going to be easy. We're going to have to daven to the Ribono Shel Olam. Ribono Shel Olam, help us get out of this obsession of Gashmias, of Olam Hazeh, of enjoying this world to the utmost, to trying to get as much Olam Hazeh as possible. And the only way to get out of it is with Siyata Dishmaya, Habol L'Tayer, Messiah Noisef. We recognize the problem. This is our Nisoyin. Reb Nosson the Mashgiach said, this is not a broche to have this moisris. It's a Nisoyin. The Eibishter gave it to us and put our generation, this is the Nisoyin of the door before the Ikvis of the Mashiach. The generation, every generation has its particular nisoyin. Our nisoyin is we're going to be thrust in a world of olam hazeh. Are we going to drown in that sea, or we're going to know to fight it and to be misgaber on it? This is what the Ribono Shel Olam wanted, to test the heart of a Yid. That you're going to have a heart. You're going to have a heart for the Ribono Shel Olam, where Chalila, your heart is going to be engulfed with Gashmis, with Olam Hazeh, trying getting as much what the Ramban writes a novel, B'shus HaTorah. We have to change our outlook on the life. Outlook on life is to realize that we and a Goy have no connection. We have a different value in life. What's important in our life is Ruchnius. The last Nevuah, before Bias Mashiach, the Novi Malachi writes, what is Eliyahu HaNovi going to come for? V'heishiv leiv ovois al bonim v'leiv bonim al avoisam. What does that mean? V'heishiv leiv ovois al bonim v'leiv bonim al avoisam. There's going to be oy ve'ish anshe beisoy. Bas koma be'imo. There's going to be rivalry between families. And why? Because they have different values. You wanted to give them and you thought it's for their better interests. But it turns out it's against them and they feel it. And then they come back with tainas. Why did you give it to me? Why didn't you guide me? Why weren't you aware of the sakonas that it's going to cause me? Instead of giving me the hadroche, what's a Yiddish lifestyle? Where my simcha is supposed to come from? From Ruchnius, from Torah and Avodah. You robbed my heart. You took away my simcha. How do you expect me to want to learn Torah? The kids come into davening, Rahman al-Islam, and they're daydreaming. I see it. They stand in shul and they don't know what to do with themselves. They come in, some of them don't even open the siddur. They don't open the siddur literally.
The siddur is closed, and if they come in, they walk out, and they come back again after 10 minutes, and then again they're 2 minutes there, and they're walking out again, and then when it becomes the Chazor, Sashatz is somehow caught up with everybody, and they're already exiting Rachmana Litzlan. What that means is they have no gishmak in davening. The heart is not there. And why don't they have the heart? Because we gave them a gishmak in Olam Hazeh. And when you give them a gishmak in Olam Hazeh, it takes away the Goyin rights and Aderes Eliyahu. If you would have kept your children when they were young away from Olam Hazeh, it would be so easy for them to feel a gishmak in Ruchnius. It's a natural flame in a person. The neshama craves, and the neshama feels the simcha from Torah and from Kedusha. But not if you stuff up the heart with worldly pleasures and you made it in a way that they can't connect to their nefesh, to their neshama apnimi. The Navi tells us, you know when Moshiach will come? When it will come a time of v'heishiv leiv ovis al bonim v'leiv bonim al avoisam. How will we get the hearts back in Yiddishkeit? If we will make that commitment, we have to stop following the Goyish world. We have to keep to the values of a Yiddish lifestyle. Ruchnius, Kedusha, and you'll get the whole simcha, and there'll be such a tainuk from Torah. The pleasure of Torah is so great. Then you wouldn't feel the need for Olam Hazeh. Lo mechazik zayin. In the Akora, in this Meiradiki Yediyah that we're Chalila emulating the Goyish world, and it's not for a Yid. When we will be mechazik ourselves, and we will strive to change our lifestyles, not to try and get as much Olam Hazeh, nor to curb your Olam Hazeh, to try and stop the pursuit of Moisres, which this is the Nisoyan that we're tested for before Moshiach. When we will make that decision that we are going to stop the pursuit of Olam Hazeh, and we're going to focus only on Ruchnius. When we're going to be Abolim Mitayah, the Rebbeinu Shem is going to be Messiahs that will be Zoichet to V'heishiv Leivovis Al Bonim V'leiv Bonim Al Avoisam B'biyas Moshiach Sikenu B'mheira V'yamein.
Should be, yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, it was going to be there. Probably, right? It was going to be there, yeah. What's cool?
Are you still in school?
Probably.
So then you could copy it, because after all, it's it off, right?
Yeah, it will always be on YouTube. It's always going to be on there. Put in their name.